Okay, here we go with another one of our YouTube videos. Now that you guys are on a 2-week hiatus, this is what we're going to go over Monday, but we'll do it on YouTube. It won't be the last, I'm sure. Once again, I will not be in the picture because it was confirmed that, yeah, you guys make fun of me. So now all you can do is make fun of my monotone voice. But here, let's get started. The effects of World War I. So we talked about World War I. It is going to be a victory for the Allies, mainly because America gets involved in it. They come in at the end with the American Expeditionary Force under Blackjack Pershing and get the job done. Russia gets out of it, and we're going to talk about some things that take place. Of course, we have the Treaty of Versailles, which is just brutal towards Germany. Germany has to pay reparations. They lose land. They cannot get their military going again. And so we're going to look at this. They're going to go into a horrible, horrible depression. But then they're going to have the last laugh as later on, America's going to go into a depression as well. All of Europe during this time is going to be in some type of depression, recession, something, which is what leads America to the Roaring Twenties. Because with the Roaring Twenties, everything is great for us because they are relying on us to send them things and they're paying for it. So we're going to talk about some of that today. Also keep in mind the League of Nations is going on, but of course America is not part of it. That was part of Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. It was the 14th point. It just crushes him that America does not do that, which makes sense. So once again, to rehash, the Great Migration is going to take place. We've already discussed this, the large-scale movement of African Americans from the south up to the north. And of course, we need to know about the push-pull factors. The push factors are, sharecropping is not going to get them ahead in life. Very little opportunities down in the south. And of course, oppressive Jim Crow laws, violence, all those things take place. Whereas the pull factors up north are basically the jobs, opportunities that they have. And this is going to be, one, because of the industrial might needed for World War I, all the tanks, military supplies that take place. And so that's one part of it. And then the second part, of course, is going to be that a lot of the white guys go over to fight. We do have hundreds of thousands of African Americans that go fight, but the bigger picture for them is it allows opportunities up north for African Americans to go there. So of course we know this painting that is associated with the Great Migration. That is how African Americans get to those cities such as Detroit, Chicago, New York in the early 1900s. So once again, Woodrow Wilson is fighting for the Senate to ratify the Treaty of Versailles. He has got to get to remember the president cannot pass that. It has to be passed by the Senate. But here's what they're worried about. Article 10 talks about alliances. And they are not looking for that. Once again, we want to go into deep isolation. That's huge. We want to go to deep isolation afterwards. We had imperialism in the early 1900s. Open door policy with China. Trade agreements with Japan. But we have, the Roosevelt corollary. We want to keep Europe out. We've now gone over to bail out the Allies. America wants to go back into strict isolationism. Keep that in mind. That is huge. And so what we don't want to do is sign a treaty where now we would have to automatically come to the rescue. One of the things that happened is we saw how World War I became World War I because of these alliances that took place. And you look at the fact that what if some country, France or Great Britain, did something really to provoke someone else, they then attacked France or Great Britain, and because we were part of the alliance, we'd have to come over and help. So it does not get passed by America, mainly because of that. One of those guys who did not want us to join the League of Nations was Henry Cabot Lodge. He is a Republican senator. He helps to defeat the passing of the Treaty of Versailles. He helps defeat us joining the League of Nations, and said mainly because he's worried about entangling alliances, which is the 10th article. So one of the attempts to get involved, though, is the Washington Naval Conference, because one of the things that we see is how strong navies can be and how that can lead to things. I've always felt that submarine warfare by Germany leads to a lot of this. And so what happens is, in the Washington Naval Conference, there's an attempt to set limits on what naval, now ships go by naval tonnage, how much tonnage it is. It can be as big as you want it to be. It just couldn't be over so many tons. Now that's going to be analogous with how big the vessel is, to be honest with you. But so that folks couldn't get away with making them wider more than longer and things like that, it is going to go by tonnage. This is one of the things that we get involved in, but reluctantly, only because we see all the problems that's going to take place with it. Now, this is another thing we do, and this is kind of one of the crazy things. So as I mentioned, the Treaty of Versailles makes Germany pay money to these European countries, what we call reparations. So make sure you know, the word reparations means to pay back for damage done. That's why when we talk about slave reparations, it is payment for damage done to people who were enslaved back in the 1800s. So Germany, according to the Treaty of Versailles, must pay back money to these European countries, Belgium, France, Great Britain. Fair enough, because, Germany did so many horrendous things to them. Here's the problem. Germany had no money. Their money is basically worthless. It's not even worth the paper it is printed on. They have no gold to back it up. And so the Dawes Plan is this, it does work. I'll give it credit. Now let me step back a second. Throughout World War I and even leading up to it, we loaned money to France, Great Britain, Belgium to keep the war going. We loan them, or we give them military goods and saying you can pay us back later on. Well, that is now due. However, they have no money. So check how this works. So what's going to happen is we are going to loan Germany money, who can then pay the reparations to Great Britain, France, Belgium, etc., who then can pay us back the money they owe us for the World War I machinery. So yeah, you figured it out by now. They are paying us back with the money that we've loaned Germany, who then pays them, who pays us, with their own money. It's a circular debt cycle. It looks just like this right here. We give $2.5 billion in loans to Germany, who then give $2.0 billion in reparation payments to the Allies, who then pay us $2.6 billion in war debt. It is crazy. Now, here's what's going to happen. So now the Allies are going to be off the hook. They're going to pay their money. So now we are going to look at Germany. You owe us money. But here's the deal. Eventually, when Hitler comes to power, do you think they're going to pay that war debt back? Absolutely not. There's going to be an effort to pay it, but finally they're just going to say, we can't afford to pay this money back. And so we lose out on the deal. When you look at it today, $2.5 billion, not a ton of money, but in 1924, 1930 money, that's a lot of money. But that's called the Dawes Plan. I guess in this one thing it says Young Plan as well. Everywhere I've ever seen it, it's just called the Dawes Plan. All right? Keep in mind, during this time we are having the 17th, 18th, 19th Amendment coming through. This is, somewhat throughout World War I, the progressive era. We have the 17th Amendment for the election of U.S. senators to do away with the political bosses. The 18th Amendment is actually at the end of the war, later going to be repealed by the 21st Amendment. and then of course the 19th Amendment, which passes the government in 1919, but doesn't pass all the states till 1920. All right? So now we're going to talk about the social and cultural effects of the Great War. First of all, the death totals. When we look at this, it's going to be about 20 million people. When you look at the two things here, you have the Entente powers, which are the Allies, the Central powers, which are these, well, that's the Central powers. And of course, the United States is very, very little because we got involved late. The Russian Empire has the most because Germany is going to invade Russia. Once again, when they do, they do this in World War I and World War II. Excuse me, had the hiccups all of a sudden. But look at this chart. At the top, you have the Russians at 1.7 million, Germany 1.6, and France at 1.3. Austria-Hungary is just under 1 million. That is analogous with those are the 4 places where most of the fighting is taking place. Britain has a pretty good chunk, but of course there's no fighting taking place over in Great Britain, which helps them out. If you look, this is a world war. We have several countries involved in it. Even Canada down there at the bottom. Australia is involved. Of course, they're on the side of the Allies. Belgium, because they're invaded by Germany to get to France. Even India, look at that. India, which is a British colony, is going to fight on the side of the Allies. America is just under halfway because we get involved rather late. So Europe was physically, socially, and economically devastated. The U.S. is going to prosper because we're making all those things. The thing that helps us tremendously, of course, is we're not being invaded. Thankfully for the Zimmerman telegram not being taken up by Mexico. But we're going to have a ton of things go right for us. Farming is great. Now let's think about this. Most of the places that farming took place in France is now going to be war zones. So it's going to take them a while for their farming to get back going. America to the rescue. So we're going to sell crops to all of Europe. And because of that, our farmers are going to do fantastic. They're going to do great. Unfortunately, that is going to lead to the Great Depression because what's going to take place is that as the farmers are making tons and tons of money, they're going to buy more land, more farm equipment. Eventually what's going to happen is Europe is going to be able to recover from this, right as these loans are due for the American farmers. So, down the road, we're talking 10 years down the road, of course, Europe is not going to need the farm product that we have. And so they're going to cut back on buying farm materials. Wheat especially, rice, potatoes, grains, all those things. And then what's going to happen is our farmers, United States farmers, are going to go out of business because they can't pay the loans back. All of a sudden now we're going to have too much product because Europe's not buying it. We know about supply and demand. If we have a ton of supply, the demand is now gone, what's going to happen to the prices? They're going to go down. So even though those farmers might be even selling the same amount of product they had, they're not going to get the price they used to get for it. They're not going to be able to make their payments. And then this is going to be what happens. This is going to be a huge thing. The influenza flu of 1917 through 1919, very analogous with today. It does start over in Europe. We don't know exactly where. It is called the Spanish flu, or the Spanish lady. Now here's the thing though. We think, well actually, take that away. We don't think it started there. It becomes publicized there. It could have started, we think, in China. Could have went through France, Germany. But the problem was, all those places, the news publications were being, not critical, restricted. Restricted is a better word. Spain was not. So what happens is when the flu goes crazy, Spain has more newspaper articles about it taking place in Spain. It's already been going through Europe by that time. This is going to be a huge thing. It's going to be very similar to what we have today, where just people being with other people. And this is where we first start talking about you need to separate that social space between people. And if you look at that, anywhere from 30 million to 50 million, we don't know the exact, because one of the things that takes place is Europe is still going through the catastrophe of war. So their hospitals are not set up. A lot of the doctors were at war. You got just Jim Bob here who's trying to cure people and stuff. But about 1/3 of the world's population contracts this influenza called the Spanish flu, even though it doesn't come from Spain. I think it comes from China. But anywhere from 30 to 50 million people die. And if you look at it, in North Carolina, just over 13,000 people die from the flu. It starts in Wilmington. It hits the seaports hardest, more than anybody else. Here's why. If you're coming from Europe and you have one person on board on a ship that has this flu, by the time the ship gets here and people are underneath and in cabins, in the mess halls and all that, it spreads like wildfire. And one of the things that they're going to find out too is that hospitals are not good places for these people to go. When you get the flu, you just need to go home and quarantine yourself. Because what happens is whenever you go into an enclosed place, it spreads. The best thing for the flu is the sun, being out in the open, and being in one place by yourself. So this is going to be tragic. You think about this. We have all the deaths of World War I. Now think about that. You're going to have almost 8 million people die there. And then in the next couple of years, you have another 30 to 50 million people die in the matter of 5 to 6 years. Isn't that amazing? And it's amazing that we had that many deaths in a war, and in just a couple of years later, that's going to be small compared to the influenza that takes place. Pretty amazing. So read those articles that I put up there. It's pretty amazing to read about that. So now we're going to talk about labor unrest. We're going from wartime to peacetime. But here's what's going to take place now. Labor unions are coming up again. And of course, keep in mind, labor unions are for the labor. They want to get them better conditions, more pay, shorter hours, all those things. What takes place now is labor unions are going to get just a terrible, terrible reputation. Because they are for the workers, they are labeled as communists. Keep in mind, we've now had the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. The communists have taken over. And one of the things they have said is that the workers are first. Workers should share in the profits. Workers should own the factories. All this is coming from Russia. So now if you're a union and you're trying to do things for the workers, you are associated with communism, who we tried to squash in Russia. And so that's not going to work well. Unions are going to get a bad reputation, and that is going to lead to us to what we call the first Red Scare. The first Red Scare. Now we're going to have two of these. Of course, they would just call it the Red Scare back here, and then we have the second one after World War II. We then refer to this one as the first Red Scare, and then the second one as the second Red Scare. But it is because of the unpopularity of strikes, people do foresee maybe a revolution taking place in America, very similar to Russia, not out of the realm of possibility. And then labor union membership had declined in the 20s because of this. People did not want to be associated with unions, but people who were already in, especially the labor leaders, they were all in. They were all in. But new people, not as much. So one of those guys was John L. Lewis, the United Mine Workers. Now keep in mind, the coal miners had to be in a union because nobody was there to fight for them. But he is going to go around, this John L. Lewis, and he is going to want the unions to be able to go in all the places, do things for the workers, and I don't blame them. I mean, if you've ever seen a coal mine, just the situation they found themselves in was horrific. But he's going to make moderate gains but at the same time, the common people are going to see the unions as a thing they got to worry about. Keep in mind too, you still have a ton of farmers who don't have unions. They're just going out there and they're working themselves to death. And so they look at these union people as communists. And we kind of miss a great opportunity here in people's minds. And if you look at it, you have labor on one side of the sign and then capitalism that represents the business people on the other side. And it says, U.S. closed on account of strikes. If capital and labor don't pull together. And you got Uncle Sam up there saying we lost a chance to really do something great. Because at this time, Europe needed us. They needed us to come in with manufacturing. We could have done so many great things. Now the farmers are going to do well in the early part of the 1920s. But as far as our manufacturing, not as much because of these problems with unions. And so we lose out on an opportunity to sell more and more product to Europe and to Asia. Farming does well, but not industry. So of course, along with the Red Scare becomes anti-immigration. And we're going to see this. That's what we're really talking about today. Here's what takes place with immigration. We're going to see the rise of the Klan again. And then, of course, the Red Scare. We're worried about people from Russia and other places coming in. Communism is starting to spread. And we're worried it's going to spread to America. Labor unions are targeted as communists. So if you look here, the political cartoon on the left, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, kid glove means to handle something very passively. And so we have tried this, and it's talking about aliens, immigration, communists and stuff, and that we've just tried to be okay with them. If you see that immigrant, that alien has a little lit bomb right there. And so now it says about time. And now what we're going to do is take off the glove and pound them, smash them, because we're tired of dealing with them. And we're going to see how that takes place here in a second. On the right-hand side, you have chaos, because you have, post-war capitalism, civilization. All that is being drugged down to the bottom by Bolsheviks, the communists. And whereas capitalism and civilization is trying to get above the water, communism is bringing it down, because in their mind, it's all about the worker and not the owner of machinery, not the owners of industry. So, of course, one of those is Eugene Debs. He's helping to organize the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World. If you had to remember one union, this is the one you need to remember, the IWW. And what we look at here is the Industrial Workers of the World. They're known as Wobblies. Okay, they're considered very radical. They're socialist. They're going to be persecuted by the government and the police on our side. They're going to actually be harassed by the police and the government, to be quite honest with you, because it's the unknown. And what's happening is all these folks that are in the IWW are protesting, and they're protesting capitalism, really, to be quite honest with you. If you look here, these are two pro-IWW political cartoons. The one on the right joined the one big union because it was trying to bring in so many different groups. It did believe, all right, we had unions by then, but you might have, maybe, I don't think we had trucking unions yet, but carpenters, you had a brick mason union, you might have had industry union. This one here is trying to bring in everybody together. Now on the left, this is pro-IWW. It's got the IWW here, the industrial unionism, and they look at capitalism as an octopus who's got its tentacles wrapped around things and stopping people from advancing. So you got wage slavery because of capitalism. It's keeping wages low. It's keeping people in poverty. Here, capitalism led to war because who made the money during the war? Capitalists who were making tons of machinery and stuff. The one I don't know, and I've looked, trying to find, we got prostitution here. I'm wondering if they mean that as in true prostitution or as in the prostitution of selling yourself, selling out, not prostitution as we think of it today. But it does say through the IWW we can kill this octopus and make it better for all the people involved on this. And then of course here it's showing this would be an anti-communist political cartoon. And what it's saying is just if we've just got rid of Germany, Germany is now surrendering, now we got to deal with the Reds, the Bolsheviks of the Soviet Union. And so within a year they're coming in, they got bombs, we got anarchists and all that, and now we got to deal with them. So we're going to talk about three immigrants that really kind of show this example.
Attention all staff members, we're going to prepare for our meeting at 1 o'clock. I'm going to make my way down there. I want to see who can beat me down there. The race is on.
Okay.
So on your mark, get set, go. So those of you that beat me down there, we're going to see who gets the prize, okay? Thank you.
So I'm going to stop on this and then let this be a second part in just a minute, which will talk about the immigrants that get a bad rap. Well, you know, they earned it in some people's minds.